Well, welcome back to the Legacy Builder Sport Discipleship Series. And now we're entering into week 8 of our Coaching to Win God's Way Leadership DVD study notes. Again, the purpose of these lessons with me on the DVD is to give you some insight so that you'll have more confidence when you teach the lessons and be able to tell the sportables or parables, as we call them, to give you just a little more of that intimacy with your group to get it to take it to a deeper level for Jesus Christ. So let's talk about last week a little bit. We talked about taming the tongue, tough lesson. We talked about the coaches implementing 2 systems to help them. One, get prayer. They need to have prayer and help. But we talked about the put-up game rather than doing put-downs. We talked about not allowing any sarcasm whatsoever. And also, we talked about the fact that we're going to think before we speak. Now, one thing that I forgot to tell you last week that is a neat thing to implement in this week's lesson, as you talk about the put-up game and you talk about how it went for them as they thought before they talked and used the THINK acronym, is the Ephesians 4:29 day at home, where they aren't allowed to say anything unwholesome or anything berating at home in their house. They call it Ephesians 4:29 day. Try it. You'll have a lot of fun with it, and leave them with that. Now, let's go into week 8. Now, I also want to encourage you. We've spent 7 weeks bringing the coach along, and if you remember, weeks 7, 8, and 9 now, we start talking about what is their purpose in the kingdom. What's going on here? We talked about who they are as a coach, but now the flow is taking them to a vision for a product. We've talked a lot about them, how to fix their body language, how to tame their tongue, you know, how to be committed to excellence in their goal setting. Okay, well, now we've taken it to another level, and now we're going to give them a little bit of a vision for what is their ministry, what has God called them to do, and that's what Seed Planters is all about. So this is a really fun lesson. And I've had a lot of people tell me that this lesson changed their life more than any other lesson in this book. So be patient here and hear me out, but I think you're really going to enjoy it. Now, this little quote underneath here on page 23 talks about seed planters. Kids may not listen to parents or teachers, but they will listen to their coach. Need to reiterate that because, again, we hold the hammer. Kids want to play. And we don't want it to be a hammer. We want it to be an incentive for them to build a close relationship with us. All right, and we have that because we are the coach and they're the player, but we need to understand with great blessing comes great responsibility. So in this case, as we jump down here, we're going to talk about their job as a calling. Now go ahead and read that scripture, and you're going to see how it ties in from Proverbs. But we're going to talk about, is coaching an occupation or a vocation, and what's the difference? Now, we spend a little bit of time on this, and what I talk about is the reality that I think at one time when I was coaching Oklahoma State, we figured out that I was making roughly, I don't know, a nickel a dime an hour or something like that when we factored in all the hours we put in. But realistically, I could go make more money at McDonald's than I do coaching. So you need to be called to be a coach. Now, what does it mean that coaching is your occupation? Well, that's just a job, a job. You're going to collect a paycheck. Well, not many people stay in coaching very long if that's what their calling is just for a paycheck, because there isn't enough money in it. And by the time you get to the higher levels, you're too old to enjoy it anyway. No, that's not true. But anyway, going back to a vocation, you'll hear a lot of people say that pastors are in a vocation. Well, they say that because they believe they're called by God to be in that vocation. Well, we believe coaches are called. They're set apart again to be there for God to use in ministry, to minister to the youth and to minister to each other in the community. So, with that said, spend a little time on that, talk about why there's a difference and what is the difference, okay? Now, in point number 2, titled The Field, this is where we're going to give the coach a vision for what God's doing. We're going to use the analogy of a farmer. And what we talk about here is just a farmer must till the soil before he or she can plant seeds. A Christian coach must get his or her players ready for life. And again, we're talking about coaching and teaching really is the only profession that allows for so many opportunities to teach and mold the leaders of tomorrow. And that's a great calling and a responsibility, though. But here's what we're going to do. As you turn to page 24, we're going to ask the coaches, what does their harvest field look like? Now, before I do this, I tell them, okay, what's your harvest field look like? But I said, before you answer this, I want you to think about, this is what I mean. When I started coaching, and as a biblical coach, all of a sudden I looked out there, and at this university I was coaching at, I was a head coach. I had maybe 100 players and 10 coaches and maybe, I don't know, 20 support staff. Well, that's a lot of people to minister to and a lot to do. Excuse me, and it felt like a lot. Well, my harvest field looked pretty strange too. It had my players, out of the 100 players, some of them were spiritually pretty strong and healthy and growing well. Then there'd be another plot over here, and that was good, healthy corn. But then this plot over here was maybe some wheat, and it was struggling. It had a bunch of parasites all over it, and weeds were choking it down, and I was constantly pulling weeds, and they had a lot of problems in their lives, and we were trying to help them and get them through. And you know, they couldn't even see what a healthy corn stalk looked like. They were just struggling to survive, you know. And then we had a whole nother plot where they were kind of in between both those plots. Things weren't too bad for them, and they didn't have a lot of weeds, but at the same time, they could care less if they grow more, or if they stayed the same. So we had to kind of try and throw some miracle grow on those people and see if we could get them to get it a little faster. So we had a lot going on. Well, it was interesting. After about my second year at that university, all of a sudden God had blessed us, and we had done a pretty good job, and he brought a lot of workers, by the way, to help me. And we were doing pretty good in biblical coaching and ministering to these athletes and the coaches into the community. And all of a sudden my plot seemed to get a little bit bigger, and I'd get phone calls from other farmers, for lack of a better word, but they were other coaches, but other farmers that would call me, and they'd say, hey, we heard you guys do a lot of great stuff for servant leadership and team building. How did you guys do that? And then I'd share with them over the phone, and that's ministering to them and helping them figure out ways they could do it on their farm and help their plants grow and help their crops grow. So now all of a sudden I jump into ministry, and all of a sudden my farm has just expanded to many, many, many farms. And I used to be able to just have one plot and one farm, but now all of a sudden I had to go get a crop duster. And what I do basically is I get in that crop duster and I fly over all these other farmers' lands, and I throw some of the miracle grow and fertilizer out of the airplane to help them, and the weed killer to help them. But then I'll park my airplane for a while on their farm, and I'll sit and talk with them, and they'll ask me questions, and I'll share things with them, much like we're doing now. And then they'll take care of their field, and I'm off to the next one. So my fields, my harvest field has expanded a great deal, and that's not for everybody. And it's not bad if your harvest field doesn't expand. It just takes time. But going back to this question, ask the coaches, what does their harvest field look like? What does God put in front of them right now? And when you ask this question, you're going to also need to help interpret what they're telling you in regard to their fields. You know, they're going to say, well, I kind of got crops growing at all different times, and you know, there's some that are choking and dying, and I feel like all I'm doing is pulling weeds, you know. And then you're going to need to be able to discern and say, well, so it sounds like, Bob, that you got some good crops, but at the same time you're spending a lot of time with the problem guys. And that's really getting you down. Is that true? And he'll say, yeah, that's pretty much what it looks like to me. Okay, great. Well, we'll have to talk about how God can help you then. But again, you're giving them you're poking and prodding them and propelling them into a vision for themselves of what God has given them and put in their harvest field, not to mention their classrooms. How many kids do they see each class period, especially the high school teachers, each class period? I mean, it's amazing. I had one youth coach tell me that every Monday night he has the dads come to his team meeting because he feels that they're part of his harvest field, that he wants to minister to the dads on how to help their sons more because they're just not around very much. So a lot of different things, and that's what I meant by the field. Okay, now